Up next in our special Year in Review edition, the South LA community demands change after the shooting death of a mentally ill black man by LAPD. LA focuses efforts on conserving water during a record drought in California. And 2 new council members take seats in LA City Council as 2 accomplished veterans bid farewell. All these stories and more coming up in our Year in Review. Hello and welcome to LA This Week. Thanks for joining us for our Year in Review edition. I'm Yana Kay. While the Police Commission makes a final ruling on a controversial shooting, officers hit the streets with hundreds of on-body cameras, and city leaders take aim at gun violence. Gil Reyes highlights these and other top news stories that made headlines in 2015.
The public continued to express outrage over perceived police brutality and racial profiling, tensions reaching a boiling point at this police commission meeting in June. That's when the commission ruled on the deadly shooting of Ezell Ford, an unarmed black man.
Our analysis has been deliberate, thoughtful, and compassionate, based on our best understanding of the facts.
The commission faulted one police officer and cleared the other in the officer's decision to shoot Ford in South LA last year. Officers say they shot him when Ford reached for one of their guns, but Ford's mother says he suffered from mental illness and may not have understood their commands.
They killed him. They got mad. They got angry. Ezell did not understand. Ezell had the thought process of an 8 or a 10-year-old. He was a baby. He was my babe.
However, the LAPD's own investigation cleared both officers of wrongdoing, and they remain on the job.
If these videos will not be shown to the public, how do we know what really happened, who did what?
More anger from the public, this time over new LAPD on-body cameras. The department rolled out 860 cameras to officers in downtown, South LA, and North Hills in September to improve investigations and transparency. But to the objection of civil rights groups, footage generally won't be released to the public. Police explained why.
That's just not a video. It could be an interview of you as the victim of a crime or somebody who witnessed what happened. We don't disclose that for a number of reasons, including protecting your privacy.
Video will only be released if it's cleared by the courts and the chief of police.
People who want to defend their homes, people who want to defend their families, don't need a 100-round drum magazine and an automatic weapon to do it.
Also this past year, LA City Councilman Paul Krikorian took aim at gun violence with 2 landmark measures. The first bans the possession of high-capacity magazines within city limits. Krikorian also introduced a second measure that would require safe storage or trigger locks for firearms in the home. Meantime, at the Department of Water and Power, questionable spending exposed at 2 DWP nonprofits. LA City Controller Ron Galperin's audit opened the books on 5 years of credit card transactions. They included expensive steak dinners, also hotel stays in Las Vegas and Hawaii.
$421,000 plus that was used for conference registration fees, airfares, automobile expenses, lodging. Now, some of these may in fact be legitimate, but there's a lot of it that, quite frankly, is not properly accounted for, and its use is not properly accounted for.
The trusts have spent $40 million in public funds for more than a decade with little or no oversight. And Los Angeles beamed with pride when the Special Olympics World Games took place.
To the athletes, we want to give you our very best wishes, and all I can say is let the games begin. Congratulations.
The Flame of Hope made its way through Exposition Park, Lakeview Terrace, Koreatown, and Studio City. Special Olympians carried the torch alongside peace officers from around the world. And those are just some of your top headlines for 2015. For LA This Week, I'm Gil Reyes.
Now, this past year, Los Angeles also became the United States' official selection to host the Summer Olympics in 2024. Paris, Rome, and Budapest are also in the running as host cities for the Games.
While the city of LA was good to its working Angelenos in 2015 after voting for a $6 an hour minimum wage increase over the next 5 years. Here's Ana Marcos with more on what was often a contentious battle between employees and employers.
A march on City Hall and a rallying cry by workers helped mark an historic vote at City Hall this year, as LA Council members approved an increase of the minimum wage from $9 to $15 an hour over the next 5 years for LA's poorest working Angelenos.
We have a cancer in the city of Los Angeles called poverty, and it is eating and destroying this city. So raising the wage to $15 is the least we can do. It is the very least that we can do.
The move was championed by Mayor Eric Garcetti, who says LA's high housing costs and often meager wages create an unlivable situation for many.
1 out of 4 of us live in poverty. This is about the idea, that American ideal, when someone works hard, they should be able to support themselves and they should be able to support their families.
Starting next summer, LA's minimum wage will go up to $10.50 an hour, with the amount increasing each year until it hits $15 an hour in 2020. Businesses with 25 or fewer workers will get an extra year before each wage hike, and teen workers will be paid at 85% of the wage. But the pay hikes drew severe criticism, especially from small businesses and restaurants, whose workers earn both tips and wages.
The tight margins in our businesses, paralleled with the proposed increase, create a very high likelihood of shutting down independent restaurants and creating significant job losses.
I, like many of them, are all for raising the minimum wage, but it cannot happen without counting tips. I believe from the bottom of my heart that the consequences will be catastrophic for all of the restaurants in the city of Los Angeles if this happens.
Garcetti says studies the city conducted point to more jobs and economic activity as a result of the wage hike. But even council members who voted yes admit they are in uncharted territory.
We want to be sure we do the most good and the least harm. We don't want to put a lot of businesses out of business.
Now the city of LA becomes the largest big city to vote to give its workers a living wage. I'm Ana Marcos for LA This Week.
Mayor Garcetti, who signed the ordinance into law last June, said he wants to lift more than 600,000 Angelenos who are currently earning minimum wage out of poverty. Well, as the state continued to face a record-breaking drought this past year, federal leaders stepped up efforts to help the state save water, while city officials encouraged Angelenos to do their part. Rasha Goel has more.
It's been a challenging year as Los Angeles has worked tirelessly to ensure it is doing all it can when it comes to water efficiency. With the worst drought in years, federal and state officials came together this past year to leverage funding resources.
And our goal is to reduce our dependence on imported water and to build sustainability and to ensure that we can continue to serve great, clean, healthy water to all of our customers.
Through a grant initiative called Water Smart, funding was provided for water conservation improvements and water reuse projects.
We're granting money to line canals and to install piping that will reduce seepage losses in irrigation systems. We're installing advanced metering equipment.
In April, Mayor Eric Garcetti launched the Save the Drop Water campaign with public service announcements promoting water conservation.
Let's turn this one-sided relationship around.
Within that residential sector, on average, half of the water is used outdoors, and in some cases 80% is used outdoors, which people have no idea. For landscaping, ornamental landscaping.
Again, it's not just critical for this drought, it's critical in the time of an enormous earthquake that disrupted our water supplies.
The PSAs were done in English and Spanish and featured narration by Academy Award nominee Steve Carell, Critics' Choice Television Award nominee Jamie Camille, and music by Grammy Award-winning artist Moby.
Our friend may not stick around.
And 4 months after the campaign launch, city officials also dumped the last 20,000 of 96 million black balls into the Los Angeles Reservoir in Sylmar, completing the program of covering open-air reservoirs with floating shade balls to help protect water quality.
And we're here to make sure that we do two things in the face of this historic drought. That first of all, and most importantly, we have clean water for us to drink. But secondly, that we preserve and conserve more of that water as well.
The plastic balls block sunlight from penetrating the 175-acre surface of the reservoir. That prevents chemical reactions that can cause algae blooms and other problems. This method was an alternative that would have cost more than $300 million. Instead, the LADWP used shade balls that cost $34 million.
And because it'll cool the temperature and cover it and shade it as well, we're going to save all of that water from evaporation.
We saved a lot of money, we did all the right things, and we're so pleased to be here today to dump the final bags of balls into the reservoir.
Los Angeles was the first city to use the shade balls in 2008. And that's your Year in Review. I'm Rasha Goel for LA This Week.
And all those efforts paid off. The city met and even exceeded water-saving targets mandated by the state. And to help us conserve even more, a number of city projects either got underway or were completed this year. Gil Reyes takes a look.
3, 2, 1, turn!
As California endured a fourth year of drought, LA city agencies took steps to conserve the little water it was receiving.
We want to make sure that the generations behind us will be able to thrive and flourish in a healthy environment.
First to South LA, the Broadway Stormwater Greenway project plans to turn parts of busy Broadway into an urban oasis. 19 area homes are receiving rain gardens. Other improvements include new wells and an underground tank to capture stormwater. A similar effort underway on flood-prone Laurel Canyon Boulevard in Pacoima. Officials say added wells by the curb will help prevent flooding to nearby homes, while collecting up to 13 million gallons of stormwater a year.
That's 13 million gallons of water less that we've got to purchase.
Also in Pacoima, a game changer at Hanson Dam Golf Course. For the first time since it opened in 1964, the links are using treated sewage water. That's right, water from toilets for irrigation.
We will more than double our goal of reducing our water use this year compared to our water use last year.
It'll soon be par for the course at Roosevelt Golf Course in Griffith Park. Crews began work on a giant tank near the hiking trails to deliver treated sewage water there too.
Reclaimed water is our future right now, especially in the drought. And the work that's doing here, the staff that has been put together is very, very special.
A new way to store clean drinking water received its LA baptism off the 134 freeway this past year. The first of 2 covered underground water tanks came online. The tanks are replacing Silver Lake and Ivanhoe reservoirs, which are open air. Open air storage for drinking water is now banned by the state.
We had to take those reservoirs offline to meet new water quality standards, and we moved the project here to the north end of Griffith Park, where we had property available.
Water at Silver Lake Reservoir is expected to return in the summer, but solely for aesthetics, not drinking. Down in LA's South Bay communities, people celebrated the rebirth of a former neighborhood eyesore. The Harbor City Greenway project removed tons of sediment from a nearby drain to improve flood protection. 7 miles away on Terminal Island, expansion of a water treatment plant is expected to more than double its output for recycled water.
Our ability to provide an economic future and a growing city is going to depend on how we manage our water, each one of us.
Water conservation also taking off near LA International Airport. Not in the skies, but below ground. A lot of airport runoff winds up in this empty field after it rains. City officials say building a storage system beneath it will be able to capture an average of 100 million gallons per year.
To be a leader in environmental sustainability, not only for the airport community, but in the nation.
Officials say the system will also funnel dirty water to a nearby treatment plant. There, water will be cleaned, then released to the ocean. Completion date in about 4 years. And those were just some of the city's water-saving projects on tap in 2015. For LA This Week, I'm Gil Reyes.
2015 saw a historical legal victory unfold for same-sex couples across the country as the nation's top court in June solidified their right to marry in all 50 states. Rasha Goel looks back at reaction from city leaders on this unprecedented decision.
In a long-sought victory for the gay rights movement, the Supreme Court ruled by a 5-4 vote that the Constitution guarantees a right to same-sex marriage, legalizing gay marriage in all 50 states. The city of LA shared its support.
And we need to take this victory and parlay it into progress across civil rights issues to make sure that the hatred and discrimination that we still see based on people's sexual orientation, based on the color of their skin and their religion, has no place in America.
What an incredible day this is. It's not just a victory for equality. It's not just a victory for gay and lesbian couples. It's a victory for families. It's a victory for children. It's a victory for all of us.
Shane Goldsmith, who married her same-sex partner in 2008, was overjoyed at the news.
And 4 months after our legal marriage by the mayor, we were in legal limbo again when Prop 8 passed. So it's hard to express how good it feels to finally stand on legal ground.
Councilmember Mike Bonin and his husband were on hand to share their joy, reflecting how this road was paved from the past.
The AIDS crisis forced a generation of gay men and their lesbian sisters to burst open their closet doors and share their stories. Many of them didn't have a choice. And as we celebrate this victory today, I want to remember that their bursting open their closet doors were foundational to where we got to be today.
And LA City Attorney Mike Feuer touched upon how this unprecedented move helps open the door for the future.
Children today who may be struggling as they are growing up with their sexual orientation can look on today and say, I can struggle privately, but publicly there is a recognition of the dignity that I possess.
A dignity that many can now proudly possess. I'm Rasha Goel for LA This Week.
Married same-sex couples can now benefit from the same legal rights as married heterosexual couples. Well, at the local level this past year, it was anything but business as usual at the polls as voters approved a landmark change in the city's election process. They also welcomed 2 new council members with very different backgrounds. Anna Marcos has more.
A reshuffling at council chambers this year as 7 seats went up for grabs. Most council members kept their seats, but they did swear in 2 newcomers. This celebration took on an Asian American flair as David Rue invited family members from Korea for his inauguration. Rue, a county government veteran for many years, survived a slew of candidates in the race and a runoff election before winning the 4th District Council seat left by Tom LaBonge, who termed out of office.
I would like to thank my hero, my inspiration, my grandmother, Christina Kyung-jae-ju. Her story was my story, and it's your story. It's the Latino story. It's the Jewish American story. It's the Irish American story. It's the American story.
Rue became the first Korean American to join the city council. He's promised to guide LA with smart development practices and sound financial decisions that help the community. Councilmember Marquise Harris Dawson celebrated his win with female mariachis. His grassroots rise to office was nothing short of spectacular. The longtime community activist won the 8th district seat, left by Bernard Parks, with a landslide vote. He enlisted a team of 20,000 supporters who campaigned door to door. Harris Dawson thanked one of his mentors, County Supervisor Mark Ridley Thomas.
There was a young activist that had been at SCLC that was kicking up dust on the city council, and I said, well, maybe I don't need to go to South Africa and fight apartheid. Maybe there's something I can do at home. And so I thank you for your example, and I thank you for being here today.
Harris Dawson plans to bring economic justice to South LA. along with better jobs, housing, and a better quality of life.
Yeah, I still feel like crying because of seeing him do this. It's a parent's dream. Yeah, it's a parent's dream. So I don't want to cry. I look very bad when I cry.
The elections brought tears of joy to some, but they also brought a milestone change to the city's election process. That landmark change decided by the 9% of Angelenos who went to the polls. Their vote has now moved city and school district elections to even-numbered years to coincide with national elections, which should get more voters involved in future city races. I'm Anna Marcos for LA This Week.
Council members who were able to keep their seats in the city elections included incumbents Paul Krikorian, Nuri Martinez, Herb Wesson, and Jose Huizar, as well as Mitch Englander, who ran unopposed. But 2 other veteran city council members said goodbye to public office after decades of service. One of them was a prominent civic leader who was termed out after 3 terms representing South LA. Gil Reyes looks back on a career that began as a cop during the civil rights movement.
The year was 1965. Human rights leader Malcolm X was assassinated in New York. Black marchers demanding voting rights came under attack in Selma, Alabama. And here in LA, riots broke out in the community of Watts. Also that year, Bernard Parks, a General Motors factory worker, joined the LAPD. No one expected him to climb far up the ranks.
There was a number of things that just were understood, that there were jobs in which blacks just didn't work.
But Parks broke the mold to become chief of police in 1997. He was appointed by then-Mayor Richard Riordan. Outspoken and independent, Parks battled the police union and exposed bad cops in the infamous Rampart police corruption case. By the end of his term, he fired 130 problem officers.
We sent the clear message that discipline and accountability could be put in place. At the same time, in that 5 years, we reduced crime to the levels of the 60s.
His celebrity grew. Parks even graced People magazine's 50 Most Beautiful People issue, with stars like Leonardo DiCaprio and Gwyneth Paltrow. But tragedy followed. In 2000, his granddaughter was shot to death, an innocent victim of gang violence. Then, after 5 years as chief, the police commission and then-Mayor James Hahn decided not to reappoint Parks. So with the support of his wife, Bobby, Bernard Parks campaigned for a seat on the LA City Council, the 8th district seat representing mostly black neighborhoods in South LA.
And so we ran in our first election. I think we got 78% of the vote.
He'd go on to serve 3 terms. As former chair of the Budget and Finance Committee, he helped steer the city from bankruptcy during the recession. He protected tenants' rights, pushed for development in blighted areas, and promised to fix 400 sidewalks by the time he leaves office. Through it all, he remains staunchly independent, oftentimes voting against council colleagues on pet projects and labor issues.
I'd rather be independent with integrity than be a part of a herd that says I gave up my values and principles just to be amongst the group. I think about what decisions I made to continue moving forward. And after 50 years, I'm very pleased. I have no regrets.
Gil Reyes for LA This Week.
As LAPD chief, Parks created the first cold case unit in the nation. This led to the arrest of grim sleeper suspect Lonnie Franklin Jr. after 2 decades on the run. And he was the councilman known as Mr. Los Angeles for his boundless energy and love for all things LA. Tom LaBonge certainly left his mark in the city, and in July he bid farewell as he reflected on a storied career. Gil Reyes took a final tour of his office.
So here we are, 3, 2, 1. You hear me okay? Hey, here comes Vadim. Get out of here, Vadim. Vadim's the youth. He goes on, but I'm out.
LA City Councilman Tom LaBonge, the most boisterous of LA's elected leaders, termed out of his job in July.
Closing on 14 years, almost 14 years as a council member. So over the course of time, I've collected a lot of things. Come on in.
His City Hall office is packed with mementos from his district. art from constituents, relics like this piece of curb from the former home of Walt Disney. There are maps, plaques, and proclamations dedicated to the folksy, football-loving former jock from Marshall High School.
Lisa, how's that report, dude? You gonna have it done today?
Oh, yes, I am.
All right, now take a minute. Don't always be a busy bee. Wave to the camera. And here's a picture of me right here. That's Pat O'Brien, and that is Lou Holtz.
He also shows us photographs. LaBonge, an amateur photographer, worked for NFL Films before politics. Prior to becoming councilman, he also spent 26 years working for the city in various roles, mostly as chief deputy to former council president John Ferraro. Altogether, that's 40 years in public service.
When you're from Los Angeles and you're able to contribute in a way like I have, it's a very good feeling to know that, you know. I haven't made everybody happy, haven't solved every problem.
As councilman, LaBonge clashed with activists over the LA Zoo's elephant exhibit. They called it inhumane and sued to close it. They lost. People have also criticized increased development and McMansionization in his district, but he's fought to preserve open space.
Well, I think the proudest moment as a representative is to be able to buy the land in Cahuenga Peak, the open space near the Hollywood sign. If you look over here at this picture here, everything here was private land. They could have built on it. Now it's parkland.
This added over 100 acres to his beloved Griffith Park. LaBonge hikes there almost daily. His knowledge of the city has earned him the nickname Mr. Los Angeles, and he plays it up for the cameras.
I can't help falling in love.
As LA's booming goodwill ambassador and chair of LA's Sister Cities program, LaBonge almost always puts on a good show, leaving crowds smiling or bewildered, oftentimes both. So what's next for the man famous for handing out pumpkin bread made by Dominican nuns to people he meets? Will he ride off into the sunset of Griffith Park?
Sometime in the future, I got to get a job because my children will still be in college, and my wife doesn't want to run in the house all day long.
Are you ruling out politics?
Not ruling it out, but I'm
Up next in our special Year in Review edition, the South LA community demands change after the shooting death of a mentally ill black man by LAPD. LA focuses efforts on conserving water during a record drought in California. And 2 new council members take seats in LA's City Council as 2 accomplished veterans bid farewell. All these stories and more coming up in our Year in Review. Hello and welcome to LA This Week. Thanks for joining us for our Year in Review edition. I'm Yana Kay. While the police commission makes a final ruling on a controversial shooting, officers hit the streets with hundreds of on-body cameras, and city leaders take aim at gun violence. Gil Reyes highlights these and other top news stories that made headlines in 2015.
The public continued to express outrage over perceived police brutality and racial profiling, tensions reaching a boiling point at this police commission meeting in June. That's when the commission ruled on the deadly shooting of Ezell Ford, an unarmed black man.
Our analysis has been deliberate, thoughtful, and compassionate, based on our best understanding of the facts.
The commission faulted one police officer and cleared the other in the officer's decision to shoot Ford in South LA last year. Officers say they shot him when Ford reached for one of their guns, but Ford's mother says he suffered from mental illness and may not have understood their commands.
They killed him. They got mad. They got angry. Ezell did not understand. Ezell had the thought process of an 8 or a 10-year-old. He was a baby. He was my babe.
However, the LAPD's own investigation cleared both officers of wrongdoing, and they remain on the job.
If these videos will not be shown to the public, how do we know what really happened, who did what?
More anger from the public, this time over new LAPD on-body cameras. The department rolled out 860 cameras